round of applause for coming out tonight. Again, thank you for joining us. Won't you give our panel a round of applause? Madam Mayor, Mayor Rollins Blake, Commissioner Batts, Councilman Brandon Scott, and Ms. Angela Jonice. I will talk more about them in just a moment. Just again, I want to welcome all of you. Those of you, how many of you heard about tonight because of a flyer that you received? Raise your hand. How many of you heard about tonight because you heard about it on the news? Raise your hand. Great. And how many of you were on the conference call that the mayor had a couple weeks ago where she allowed folks to give their opinion about the curfew law? Raise your hand. I did see a few. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. This is a nice summer evening. You could be at a whole lot of other places, but you chose to join with us tonight, so we are thankful. We're thankful for your patience. We're asking that we respect this process, that we respect those who speak, that we do not try to overspeak one another. And then when we go to the Q&A portion, I will direct you to either Mr. Larry Nunley, who is on my right, your left, if you could raise your hand, Larry, or I will direct you to Mr. Christian Song, who's on my left and your right, both of which will be holding the mic. I looked at the aisles, and it looks like there's enough room for you to sort of move towards the end to ask your question. We're asking that we not pass the mic down. Not that any of you would do this, but we have been at some places where folks don't like to return the mic. Okay? Thank you. All right, we're all on the same page. Now, without further ado, I would like to certainly present, and not introduce, but present to you our mayor, the mayor of the city of Baltimore, Madam Mayor Stephanie Rollins Blake.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It is certainly my pleasure to see all of you. I want to thank all of the residents for coming out. I want to thank our community leaders, first for helping us to spread the word about this event, and also for being here this evening. I want to personally thank Dr. Wilson and Morgan State University for hosting this evening, and for again making Morgan State University of the community and not just in the community. I also want to thank the panel who is here, including Councilman Brandon Scott.
Thank you, ma'am.
I want to thank City Councilman Bobby Curran, who I saw, there he is, over in the corner. I want to thank Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark for being here, Chief Ford, as Gus mentioned, Ms. Angela Jonice, and I also want to thank I mentioned Chief Ford and Commissioner Batts. I wanted, since Chief Ford won't be speaking at this event unless you direct a question to him, I want to thank him for his work and mention that the Chief is looking to hire Baltimore City residents to find careers in the fire department. He is partnered with Dunbar already and is looking to partner with Douglas.
We're already partnered with Douglas. We're looking to partner with Dunbar.
Oh, and Patterson. His hope is to develop what he calls farm teams, where we can develop our firefighters from the high school level up and make sure that the fire department is not just protecting us, but creating opportunities for Baltimore's families. So if you know someone that is interested, why don't you stand up, Chief Ford, so everybody can see you. Thank you very much. So this issue that we're talking about today with the curfew law and getting some feedback and hearing from the bill's sponsor, it is very important to me, and it's personal for me. You can't go to the curfew center as a parent and see a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning who was brought in not because they were doing wrong, but because no one was caring for them. They were out on the street, and a responsible adult could not tell you where they were at the time. And I have a child. My daughter's 10 years old, and even though she thinks she's grown, I would be heartbroken to think about her wandering the streets of our city or any city at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock at night without a responsible adult. We know it's not the place for our children to be unattended. I know when we grew up, it was the norm. When the street lights came on, somebody had to know where you were. It's not rocket science. It's not newfangled parenting. It is common sense. We want to make sure that our kids are not doing harm to anybody else and not in harm's way, plain and simple. And I want to thank Councilman Scott for putting forward very thoughtful legislation that updated the, I think, out-of-date and antiquated curfew law to take out the taking out the criminal penalty, putting in place a fine and a way for parents to avoid the fine. Why? Because this is not about being punitive. This is not about increasing the contact that young people have with the police, but it's increasing the contact that vulnerable children have with the resources they need and their parents with the support that they need. What we've seen from the existing curfew center that exists during the summer is we don't have a lot of repeat customers. Why? Because when we make it clear to parents what the expectations are, that you just can't have your kids running around all times of night and nobody know where they are and no responsible adult is watching them, that's not acceptable. It wasn't acceptable when our parents were kids, it wasn't acceptable when we were kids, and it shouldn't be acceptable now. So this is about making sure that we're clear about the expectations of parents, and we're clear that if you need help, we're willing to put those resources in place so you can get them. But we're not going to turn a blind eye to children that we know are in harm's way. We're not going to turn a blind eye to children we know who are causing harm. Because we know that the problem exists, and we know, despite all of the efforts that we're doing, it doesn't matter whether it's summer camp, after-school activities, recreation centers, church programs, all of those things don't help at 1 o'clock in the morning. And that's what this is about. Being clear that we all know that it's a problem. We know that there are children who are falling through the cracks, and not doing something is not an option. So I want to thank you very much for coming out this evening. I'm looking forward to making sure in the implementation of this bill that we achieve the goal of making not just these connection centers during curfew, but creating really resource centers for families that can evolve into centers that will be available 24 hours a day in the community. I know when I said that, finance is probably cringing, and Angela is probably like, okay, how are we going to do that? But I think in the long term, that's something that we can get to. Again, this is to keep our children safe and make sure that we continue to invest in our young people in meaningful ways, and we are. This isn't about either or. I've heard when I've talked to people about that you should spend the money that you're spending on the Youth Connection Center and spend it on youth programming. That still doesn't eliminate the problem that we know exists in our community. So it's not an either or. I don't have the luxury of either or in this position. You have to do both, and we're doing both. We're investing in opportunities for young people. We've provided opportunities for more than 5,000 of Baltimore's young people in summer jobs through Youth Works. We have new recreation centers coming on board in Morrill Park and Cherry Hills. Our plan to rebuild bigger and better recreation centers or community centers, the ones that when we went to the community and asked what you believed was the future of recreation in parks, you said you wanted quality over quantity, and we're working diligently to put the resources to provide those, with 2 new centers coming on board. And I've also recently announced the expansion of Head Start across the city, and I will continue to work to make sure that we utilize the $1.1 billion investment in school construction to leverage into stronger neighborhoods across our city and to ensure that our world-class children go to school in world-class facilities. Again, contrary to chatter in the social media universe. This is not about criminalizing young black children, but rather reaching those children before they find themselves in a situation where the only option left is law enforcement. I hope that this proves to be a very constructive and productive conversation, and I cannot thank you enough for deciding that it was important to spend some time with us here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Commissioner Batts.
See, Mayor, they clapped for you when you came up. To me, they just stare at me. In a word, hope. See, I became a police officer because of that word, is to provide hope. Hope to individuals, hope to communities. Because when I was growing up in South Central LA as a very poor kid, I wondered if anybody cared if I was going to succeed in my life or not. Or was I just another number? You know, I just left the meeting. I had to rush out, and I was rushing to get here because the previous meeting that was already set for me were with a group that I have, mothers of sons and daughters who have been lost to the violence in this city. And what those mothers said to me as I walked out that door is they said, tell them that we are in support of the curfew. The mother said, tell them if we can't make it that this makes a difference because I'd rather visit my child in one of those centers than visit my child in the morgue. That's not my words. That's coming from mothers who had to deal with the pain. Hope. When I see a child out on the streets of Baltimore at 1 a.m. in the morning on a Wednesday night, they're not going to school most likely. They don't have hope. Their best ability to get out of the environment that I was in when I grew up was my education and hope. What we're trying to do and what I was brought in to do is to change and connect this community to this police organization. To be a part of this community, not apart from this community. You know, recently I've had a chance to go to a number of the high schools, and I've sat down and I've listened to the young people. And not just talk to them or talk at them, but to listen to them. Very enlightening. And to craft an organization that serves all parts of this community, including the young people here. We're not trying, or I'm not trying to implement a tool that the councilman built to be an enforcement piece. I'm trying to build a tool to keep our kids safe. Less than 2 weeks ago, I was out on the street at 3 a.m. in the morning. I had been out all night. My day started at 9 a.m. I finally got out of the police station at about 4 a.m. But at about 3 a.m. in the morning on the streets of Baltimore, I got a group of kids, 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old. I said, what are you guys doing out here? We're just riding our bikes at 3 a.m. in the morning when you're a 12-year-old child? And so I said, with your cell phone, call your parents. And I talked to the parents on the other end. I said, did you know that your child is out in the streets of Baltimore at 3 a.m. in the morning? No, I didn't know that they were out there. Could you come pick them up? And I will wait here until you come pick them up. What we're trying to do is not give a record, not to impact, to make sure our children get home safely. And we're also making parents accountable for their children. Thank you.
Certainly, I know I do not need to introduce the next young man. He is City Council Representative Mr. Brandon Scott.
Thank you, Gus. Good evening.
Good evening.
We're going to try that again. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. There we go. There we go. I'm going to be very brief, but to the point here. The mayor and the commissioner have said a lot of what I've already planned to say, but after the commissioner finishes his talk that he just gave, you just feel the need to say amen. We all know that in the city of Baltimore, there is no elected official that knows more than I and my counterpart, Nick Mosby, about growing up poor, black, and a male in this city. There's no elected official who knows more about losing countless friends to violence in the city. But the curfew is just not about that. there's also no elected officials that know more and closely about seeing our friends be asleep through half of the school day, or not come to school, or seeing our friends stay out when we go in house when the light comes on at night, and then seeing those friends over the years, because we all grew up. You know, Brandon Scott grew up in the same neighborhood of Park Heights in the 90s that Andre Tucker grew up in. We went to the same school. We both went to Tawanda Recreation Center, played at the same baseball team. But at 9 o'clock at night, Brandon was at home in the bed. Andre was still out on the street. And unfortunately, Andre's still out on the street until this day. The only difference between myself and a lot of my counterparts is that I had a strong family. We were all poor. We all grew up in that hellhole. And that's what this is about. For me, this is about taking something. If we're going to have a curfew in the city, and we've had one since I was 10 years old, 1994 is the year that the curfew was introduced, it should make sense. If you're going to have a curfew, then what sense does it make to legally have our young people out at 11 o'clock on a school night when the hours for them to get 8 hours to go to sleep to be ready to go to school are not there? It doesn't make sense. You're operating against your own best interest. What sense does it make for a 2-year-old and a 16-year-old to have the same curfew? It doesn't make sense. And what I did was, this isn't something that we did haphazardly. I actually researched. Legislators do that from time to time. And I got my butt on a plane, and I went to Kansas City to see their curfew, to see how they did it. And lo and behold, the curfew isn't the same as it is all year round. When school is out, the kids can be out later. If you're older, you can be out later. And that's what this is about. This isn't about driving down youth crime. We're going to do that through all the things that we do to diversion, Operation Safe Kids, all the late night stuff that we have for after schools. That's how we're going to do that, by teaching these young people there's another way. This is simply about one thing, and that is connecting the most vulnerable children and their family to the resources that they need. Because if you are me, and you've worked the curfew center, and you've had a 4-year-old tell me, I got caught on purpose so I could eat. If you had a young lady come in and say, I don't think I can graduate because I'm pregnant, I'm going to have to drop out and get my GED, and be able to see that connection be made for her to say, hey, no, there's other opportunities for you. That's what this is about, because we know that at the end of the day, we can have all the programs in the world. If no one is watching our young people, if people are not taking responsibilities for their children, then we're all working against, and we're all working for naught. So we have to come together, hold people responsible, and do what sometimes is tough love. You think I like going in the house at 9 o'clock at night? No, I didn't. And ultimately, I was telling some folks earlier today, I knew that my dad and my mom was now, as an adult, doing something that was great for me, because that kept me from the beast. That kept me from hanging out at the ranch. That kept me from being some of my friends who are no longer here with me today. So we know this isn't the perfect solution, and let's be clear. We have been enforcing the curfew for 20 of the 30 years that I've been on this earth. The young children are not arrested. They're not taken to baby bookings. They're not put in handcuffs. This is not what this is about. So what we need to do is talk about the actual issue and what actually happens, so that we all can work to make this Baltimore better for our young people. Thank you.
Okay, before I announce or bring Angela up here, how many folks here know about the porch light rule? Because I heard the mayor allude to it in Brandon, so apparently we were all somewhere along the line raised in the same community. I certainly had the porch light rule, and then there was a street light rule. And the porch light superseded the street light, depending on how my day was going. Next up, we have born and raised in Baltimore, so you know we understand. Next up, we have Angela Jonice. Angela is the director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight to show your concern for Baltimore's young people. As Gus said, I'm Angela Jonice. I'm the director of the Mayor's Office on Criminal Justice. And thank you, Madam Mayor, Commissioner Batts, and Councilman Scott, because you've laid out the philosophy of the curfew. And so With their points, you should understand where the city of Baltimore is coming from with regard to the curfew. That this is not about arresting young people, locking them up, and taking them off the streets of Baltimore. That, as everyone has said repeatedly, this is about getting them connected to services and using this opportunity when they do come in contact with law enforcement to connect them to services and supports that can increase their chances for success or turn them away from delinquency. In the audience, I see a number of people. I have people here from my agency, from partner agencies, and other community organizations and community advocates who have worked with us on the curfew implementation and on the youth connection centers that will open in August so that law enforcement have centers to bring young people to. I mention the people in the audience because I often refer to the Mayor's Office on Criminal Justice as the ultimate collaborator. We recognize that we're one city agency, but with our partner agencies, with community organizations, and with you as constituents, as community members, we can make much more of a difference in the lives of young people. As we work to implement the new curfew ordinance that's going into effect on August 8th, we have worked with partners to determine what will happen with the young people and what services will happen in the connection centers. But before I get to that point, I guess I'm the one tasked with walking us through what the actual curfew legislation is. Have people had a chance to review the law or have read articles about what the new curfew will be? Yes, okay. So we understand that for young people under the age of 14, the curfew starting on August 8th will be 9 p.m. all year round. So every night of the year, if you're under 14, you have a 9 p.m. curfew. If you are at least 14 but under age 17, because the curfew is not in effect for 17 and older, then during the summer, starting on the Friday before Memorial Day and going to the last Sunday in August, the curfew is 11 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. I'm sorry, it's 11 p.m. every night for 14 to 17. During the school year, it is 11 p.m. on Fridays, 11 p.m. on Saturdays, and 10 p.m. on weekdays. For some, when they first heard the curfew and you saw the news stories that said Baltimore has the strictest curfew in the country, there were people who thought, oh, the mayor and the police commissioner want every child off the street at 9 p.m. But that's not the case. There are exceptions to the curfew. Are people familiar with some of the exceptions? Okay. So the exceptions for the nighttime curfew, if you're accompanied by a parent, you're not in violation of the curfew. So the goal is not to take all the youth off the streets at 9 p.m., 10 p.m., or 11 p.m. and make them go inside. The goal is to make sure that our young people are safe and supervised. So if you are accompanied by your parent, then you're not in violation of the curfew. Another exception is if you're exercising First Amendment rights protected by the United States Constitution, such as the free exercise of religion, freedom of speech, or the right of assembly. So if by chance there is a late night rally or march and you're participating in that, you are not in violation of the curfew. If you're a young person and you're in a motor vehicle involved in interstate travel, that's also an exception. I know there are a lot of people who asked about this one. What if I'm 14, 15, 16, I'm going to work? Do I have to stop working? You don't have to stop working. If you're engaged in an employment activity or going to or returning home from work without any detour or stop, then you're not in violation of the curfew. So we're not saying young people can't work at night. We're saying that once you get off work, please go inside. If you're going to work, please go directly to work. If you're involved in an emergency between those hours, that's also an exception. Here's another area that we've addressed that comes up often in terms of whether it's a curfew violation. So I'll read this one, I might read it twice. If you're on the sidewalk next to your residence or next to the residence of your next door neighbor, And, this is important, the neighbor did not complain to the police about your presence, then you're not in violation of the curfew. So if your neighbor has complained about you being on the sidewalk, that is different. That is not an exception. But if your neighbor is okay with you playing next to the sidewalk or next to the property between your homes, then that is an exception to the curfew. Lastly, if you are attending without any detour or stop, going to or returning from an official school, religious, or other recreational activity supervised by adults and sponsored by the City of Baltimore, a civic organization, or another similar entity that takes responsibility for you, you're not in violation. I'm gonna use Rex and Parks because I see their staff here, and I know that they have, dive in the, I'm gonna mix up the name, but there's an activity, dive in movies, on Friday nights. They start at 8 p.m. And so if a young person is participating in that activity and they leave to go home at 10, they're not in violation of the curfew. If they're being supervised and they're leaving that activity, that is an exception. And I had a chance to talk to Councilman Scott earlier about activities that have gone forth this summer. For instance, does everyone know about Be More Night Hoops, the basketball, midnight basketball league? Okay. All right, we have some advertising to do, Tracy. All right, so for young people who are participating in midnight basketball, they'll get wristbands so that officers know that they're coming from a midnight basketball activity and they're just not out on the streets, but that they are leaving a sanctioned activity. So work is being done to ensure that organizers of late night activities communicate with their local police districts, so that when youth are out and about for functions, communication is key because officers in the area can know that there's an activity that's letting out so that they can just be aware that young people are going to and from that activity. And so those are the exceptions to the nighttime curfew. Along with the changes to the nighttime curfew, there were also changes to the daytime curfew. So now, on August 8th, when school starts back later in August, the daytime curfew will be 7:30 to 3 p.m. on school days. So that means students should be in school on school days. It has been the custom of Baltimore Police Department and Baltimore School Police that if a student is out, they will take them back to school on school days. But here are the exceptions to the daytime curfew. If a student has written proof from the school authorities excusing their attendance at a particular time, then they're not in violation of the daytime curfew. If a student is accompanied by the student's parent or by an adult, we'll get to questions. I see you. If they're accompanied by a parent or an adult, then they are not in violation of the daytime curfew. And lastly, if they're going to and from school, then they're not in violation of the curfew. And I see there are a couple of hands. There will be time for questions. Just give me a few more minutes to talk about the Youth Connection Centers. So, since 2007, the Mayor's Office on Criminal Justice has operated a summer curfew center that the mayor talked about. In that curfew center, we had school police, Baltimore Police Department, the Maryland Department of Juvenile Services, and last year we had the Maryland State Police who were working with us to make sure that children who were out after 12 were not victims of child trafficking or human trafficking. We also work with the Department of Social Services so that for very young children, and previously it was children under 13 who came to the summer curfew center would be referred to the Department of Social Services because they were young and more vulnerable. So we would want them to go to this child serving department. And also, if children were in the custody of the Department of Social Services as foster children, they will be referred to the Department of Social Services or Child Protective Services. So building on these partnerships and on the philosophy that we emphasize that this is about connecting children to services, we decided to enhance what we were doing with the Summer Curfew Center and open connection centers across the city so that once children were brought in for curfew violations, they could talk to people who were used to working with young people and families, and an assessment could be done to determine if there were supports that could be put in place, such as mentoring, counseling for the child or the family, trauma services, tutoring services, and so forth, so that we can strengthen our young people and families to become prosperous young adults. And through that approach, we have, again, I cannot say enough that this is a partnership. The Mayor's Office on Criminal Justice, working with the Department of Recreation and Parks, are opening 2 centers next month, one on the east side and one on the west side. Within the centers, and I'm pointing to my staff because we've had the delight of interviewing people who want to be youth connectors. And for anyone who ever says that Baltimore has a shortage of services or a shortage of people who care about young people, that simply is not true. We have had the opportunity to interview people who glowed at the idea of working in the Youth Connection Centers and having the chance to work with young people, to offer classes, to talk about, we heard stories about offering drumming classes and dance classes and music classes and arts and craft and so forth. People who were willing to work the hours that the centers will be open, which are 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. So we're working overnight to make these connections with young people. And so we are really excited about the centers opening and their potential to serve as resource centers for young people and families. And as the mayor stated, we're up to the challenge of figuring out how to operate these centers 24 hours a day. So we're starting with the night shift, and once we get that down, I'm sure we'll be ready to go 24 hours a day. Because we want these centers to not only be a place that law enforcement bring curfew violations, but we want them to grow to centers that young people can come to, that they can walk into and say, I need help. Or simply say, I need a safe place to hang out. I need a place to be where I know that the staff and the adults that are here care about me and want to see me do better, improve, grow, prosper, and so forth. So as I laid out a list of what our youth connectors are able to do, those are the type services that we will offer in the Youth Connection Centers. With the Summer Curfew Center, while we had the Department of Juvenile Services in place, we didn't have all the services that we want to have on site. And so we're planning to have the youth connectors and also youth engagement specialists who can occupy the time of the young people while they're waiting for parents and guardians with positive, constructive activities. And so our centers are operating in 2 recreation centers, and so there will be the opportunity to engage in recreation activities. There will be a chance to engage in art, music. We have received calls from volunteers who want to come in and help us. We received a call from a local IT and computer organization who wants to donate their time and services to teach computer classes and training during the hours that the connection centers are open. So I could go on and on, but I know you're probably tired of hearing my voice. I could go on and on about the potential that the Youth Connection Centers offer to the young people of Baltimore. I know that we're going to take questions, so you may hear from me more about what exactly will go on in the curfew centers. I know the commissioner mentioned it, and I think Councilman Scott, but I want to reiterate that this is not about connecting young people to the juvenile justice system. It's just the opposite. So we're looking at ways to prevent and intervene before the police are making an arrest of juveniles. So we feel like this is the opportunity to ensure that our young people are moving in the right direction. And through the support of everyone working together, we can do that. So thank you all again for coming out, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Angela. There were several hands that went up for questions from this end all the way to the other side of the room. So rather than start on the front, I'd like to start on the floor, and then we will come back and I'll introduce a few people who are joining with us, who are community leaders, who have been a part of this partnership moving on. There was a hand up over here. Come on, no one be bashful or shy. There was a hand up on next to you, Bilal. That was either a hand next to you or you on the end. Yes, ma'am. You had your hand up? You're Christian. All right, who has their hand up would like to ask the question, the first question? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Please give us your name, and then you can give us your question, and then I'll come back over to this side of the room. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We'll come to her, and then we'll come back over here.
Okay, so I'm trying to decide which question to ask and limit it to one.
Well, can you give us your name first?
Oh, okay. So my name is Chiquita Crawford.
Okay.
And I live in Northeast Baltimore. And what was the other thing you asked? You had
Just your name and your question.
Okay, so I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning, since I have about 10 questions. So I'm going to just go to one, the first one.
Okay, so because of this.
My question is this.
Go ahead.
With the youth in the neighborhoods, when they are out all hours of the night and they're in the neighborhoods, what happens does your law or your bill or whatever the case is, however it is at this point, I'm not sure, does it cover youth being out with their parents if their parents are on the porch and the youth are all down the neighborhood, all around the blocks, all over the place, but the parents are still outside and they're in your neighborhood, in your block, on your porch, destroying things that you put up during the day, but they're out there tearing it down at night? And where can we get a copy of this? What is it, a bill or is it a law? What is it at this point?
Law.
It's a law at this point. So where can we get a copy of it so we can see all of the details of it at this point as well? Because I need to know I need to know what it is, so when I call, I know what my rights are.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good question.
Thank you, Gus. And ma'am, I will email you, as you are my constituent, I will email you a copy of the law later on tonight. But to ask your question, as we said earlier, if the young children are being watched by an adult, they're exempt from the curfew. But if they're destructing property, that's something that still you can call into the police, even though I would try to say that's something that before bringing in the police, we should try to resolve that within the community first.
But your law says that as long as the parents are out, and then I hear the watching part, but we know that most times they're not being watched, so they're out. The parents are out, the child is out, but they're not together.
If they're not together, if the kid is on a different block than the parents, then they're not exempt from the curfew. But if they're in front of their house on their block and the parents out there on their porch, then the police are not going to pick that child up.
Thank you. Now, was everyone able to hear Councilman Scott? We have okay, just for the sound folks, if we could probably turn the table mics up. If not, I'll just have a cordless that I'll hand around. We had a question over to...
Larry has one.
Yes, there she is.
How are you? My name is Melissa Bagley. I'm actually part of the State Central Committee in the 45th District. I have 4 of my 5 sons with me today, and this question is to Commissioner Batts. My concern, I am excited about the plans that we have for our young people to engage them in the evening. My concern is our Baltimore City Police Department going to get additional training for healthy interaction with our young people. The reason why I asked, a few weeks ago, around Lake Clifton, I believe it looked as if the curfew law was being enforced even at that time, because I know it's consistent. We saw maybe 4 or 5 cars of police jump out on a large group of children, like a SWAT team. And the language used towards those young people got the reaction that we expect. What are we going to do to make sure that our law enforcement are prepared to deal with our young people in a way that this transition does not end negatively or fatally?
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Bagley. I appreciate your time, and I applaud your good-looking sons there, and thank you for bringing them out. Sincerely appreciate that. And I hear you loud and clear. Number one, if we had officers who were out of line and treated our residents inappropriately, no matter what their age is, number one, the head of my internal affairs is going to reach out and get your information so we can follow up on that, and I can hold those who are out of line accountable. That's the first step that we'll take, because I set the tone very clearly in what I expect and what I want out of the agency. But there is, absolutely, there is also some training that we're doing. We're implementing a lot of training within this organization. We're gonna train and we're gonna overtrain. Some of the training that we have is impartial policing, which means that we don't come with biases and teach officers not to have bias in how they apply the training. We have legitimacy training, which is what you're really talking about right now, is a theory that we call legitimacy, and that we're going in trying to solve a problem, but how we solve it leaves a sour taste in the mouths of our community. And so if that's the case, then we have to change what we're doing, and we have to change the mechanisms that we're doing. We're also implementing sensitivity training overall within the organization, and how to understand a little differently from legitimacy training, but from an empathetic standpoint, much like when I was talking to the mothers of murdered sons and daughters, what I was talking to them about is how do we share with the officers what it feels like to be on the opposite side of this, to improve sensitivity, and so we grow along those lines. We're also doing the same thing with our gay and lesbian transgender community. How do we teach officers how we better police all our different communities, whether it's youth or not, and how we serve the community in a better way. So we have a tremendous amount of training that's going on. We're just not going to do it one time. We're going to continue. Part of what the mayor has asked me to do as I walked in is to move towards reforming this organization. As I say many times, is that I didn't break the pieces that people come up and share, but we're doing everything that we can for a brighter and different future as we move forward with our community and hand in hand with our community.
Sorry, quickly, I wanted to add, I work with the moms of murdered sons as well. They actually led the Million Mom March with me on June 21st, A Million Moms United. What we wanted to ask as well is, how do we get involved? I have well over 100 moms that want to step up to the plate and provide 24-hour support for this, so that we can create a safe haven for our young people and not just have them displaced somewhere else.
Thank you, Ms. Bagley.
So I will, to that point, before you get into it, Ms. Janice, and thank you for your willingness to step up and to be a part of the solution. I want to allay your concerns about the potential negative impacts. To say this, we've had the implementation or the implementation or the enforcement of the curfew law throughout the summer for years. We just didn't have the year-round curfew, and we have consistently decreased the number of discourtesy complaints with the police, and we have not had a problem of negative interaction with young people and the police in the curfew center. So it's not, we're not going to flip a switch on August the 8th and start enforcing the curfew differently in the way that we treat young people. This is about making sure that our young people are safe. That's what it was when we were enforcing it before. That's what it will be moving forward. And as I said, the number of incidents, they have not been there as far as the negative interaction. Moreover, the number of recidivists, the number of repeat customers to the curfew center during the summer is very, very low. So what that tells me is when you hold parents accountable, when you let parents know, we see you, we know that you're not doing what you need to be doing. You can't hang in the club while your kids are hanging in the street, right? They figure it out. If they can't watch them, somebody does, but somebody has to be responsible for our kids.
Mm-hmm. And just one thing that I left out during my talk, if you have questions that don't get answered tonight, or if you want to volunteer, you can get in touch with us by emailing curfew@baltimorecity.gov. So curfew@baltimorecity.gov.
So Angela just stole my line, and that is, when you came in, many of you should have received a survey, And on that survey, there's a question about would you or are you interested in volunteering for a Youth Connection Center? There are also a few other questions, and it's an opportunity for you to leave your information. So we want to thank Ms. Bagley for that question, and certainly for her wanting to volunteer, her and some members of her organization. I will say, I'm asking that folks, now you don't have to come up to the mic, we will come to you with the mic. But the reason we're using the microphone is because this session is being recorded and the audio cannot be heard if you just speak out in the audience. One. Two, we just don't want to cut anyone off. All right? Yes, sir. And then after you is a lady, yes, ma'am. And then we'll come back over to this side. Yes, sir. Your name
My name
and
is
your
Percy
question.
Smith. I'm a representative, Bill. And I want to look at it from an economical perspective. You're going to put police officers, have them canvass certain areas. Is it just Fells Point or is it East Baltimore? Will it be Park Heights or will it be Camden? That's my question.
Thank you, sir. Smith, yes. Actually, you, ma'am, in the denim jacket, you were after this gentleman in the. Yes. Before we go to the next question, we're going to let the answer. We're going to let the answer come from the panel.
So, sir, just to start, in my previous employment, I actually ran the Curfew Center. The curfew is enforced all across Baltimore City. All across Baltimore City. There is no district, each of the non-police district, enforced the curfew. Actually, historically, you're in the one that typically has the most curfew violations in the Northeast District. Most of that is probably a product that most of the children, 30,000 youth in the city of Baltimore, live in the Northeast District. But it's not just about downtown, the harbor. It's about East Baltimore. Actually, the colonel, who, when he was a major, and I actually used to sometimes, to the dismay of the former police commissioner, go out ourselves and enforce curfew. When we saw young people that were vulnerable in this neighborhood, it doesn't matter where it is in the city, that it's going to be enforced no matter where it is in the city, wherever there's a child that looks like they need the help. And we know, the officers know, when you go out and see, and the great thing about doing it year round is something I've been saying about this, is those same young children that you see out during the summertime are the same ones you see out with no coats in the wintertime. So we have to do something for these young people. It doesn't matter if they live in Armistead Gardens, if they live in Cherry Hill, if they live in Brooklyn or Curtis Bay. It doesn't matter where they live. We have to do something better for these children and their families.
Yes, ma'am. Your name and your question, and then we'll come over and I'll introduce you to a few other folks.
My name is Fatima Wilkerson. I live in Southeast Baltimore, and I have a 15-year-old and an 11-year-old, both black males, obviously. But I had a couple of questions, and I really don't want to take up too much of your time, but I think they kind of lead into each other. And I hear everything that the mayor is saying and the police commissioner is saying about seeing 8 and 9-year-olds outside at 1 a.m. Of course, those are very extreme cases, and I absolutely understand. If I was out at that time of night and I saw a child that age, I would be very concerned. But then you have these areas where it's kind of gray. Like, I've seen some really big 14-year-olds. I mean, I've seen some 14-year-olds that look like men. And I've seen some really little 16-year-olds. So how do you expect there to be some type of implementation of their age range, that difference in the age range? Are they going to jump out on you, demand ID, where you're going, what you're going to do? I live in an area where there are a lot of break-ins. There's some really, really, really smart kids where they know how to come up with a lie like that. So when you're talking about enforcing it for a child or a mother of a child who's not really in that category of services, but I live in an area where I want my son to live in a walkable neighborhood or be comfortable taking public transportation or go to events, and he's in private school, so he's not in school every day when Baltimore City schools are in. So I have to say, look, you're in a combat zone, they're gonna send you down here, they're gonna find you, stay in the house, I work in the operating room, I can't answer the phone to come give you if I'm in surgery, and it's just little gray areas like that really, really frighten me for my son in a city where I want him to stay. I don't want him to hate the police or get that feeling like the city isn't for him, that when he turns 18, he leaves and isn't coming back to make a difference. And also, why is the police officer even necessary to enforce it? Like, you have social workers in the schools, you have DSS, you have all these other systems that are supposed to be in place to offer these services. So who's going back into these systems and saying there's a breakdown somewhere, there are too many children slipping through the gap? A child shouldn't have to leave out their parents' house at 10 o'clock at night and find a police officer to say that they're hungry. They should be able to go to their social worker, their teacher in the school. It should be other plans on a social level to where police officers can go and do police work. Also, I agree with this young lady. I've been in Patterson Park and seen kids riding their bike and had men in SWAT uniforms, like with bulletproof vests, follow the children at 5 miles an hour through the park. When they stop next to the children just because they're riding their bikes in the park. So it's definitely a community, it's some type of confusion between what ideally implementation would look like, but realistically what it looks like when you live in these communities. And I guess the main question is, how do you revamp the services in the schools so that this type of service isn't even needed?
Thank you, Ms. Wilkerson.
So first, Ms. Wilkerson, and I hope this is working. All right. First, thank you for coming out, and I appreciate what you said, that you want your son to stay here. That means a lot. I also hear what you said when you said that the reality of the interaction with the police and the ideal, or what we say is our preference or what we expect, our expectations, can be different, and we're working to make that better. As the commissioner said, if you can give us any identifying information so we can try to track down the officers at fault, please give us that information. The incidents of discourtesy aren't going down by accident. We're being intentional about making sure, and every time I speak at a graduation, I talk to the cadets about treating the people of the city the way that they would want somebody to treat their family. And that's important to me, because I know that we cannot be a safer city, maybe for 6 months, maybe for a year, but over the long term, which is my goal, we can't be a safer city if the people who we serve don't trust us and don't want to work with us. So I am striving to get it right. So again, if you can give us any identifying information, please let us know. I will have the police commissioner and Ms. Janice talk about the enforcement, because we're not trying to get kids caught up. I know that kids come in all shapes and sizes, and this is, for me, more about making sure that we are aware and vigilant, that when we see a child that we think is, either at risk of doing harm or being in harm's way, that we're doing something about it. And you're right, in a perfect world, there'd be social workers on every corner where this is happening, but that's not the reality. The reality is the people who are out on the street at 1 o'clock in the morning, besides the people that are, besides some of the people that are out at that time or getting into trouble, the ones that are also out there because they work those hours are police officers. And it makes more sense as far as being efficient, instead of to deploy a legion of social workers, to put them at a central location and to connect those young people with the people who are already out there on the street, who are not, that this is not, again, about being arrested. It's about being taken to where the social workers are and the other community workers are, so they can get connected to services. So.
The gray area, a 1 o'clock morning scenario is something I think that that gray area, when you have a 14-year-old that has an after-school job, or they're doing 2 a days football practice that doesn't end until 8:30 at night, that's when it becomes an issue. Like, how do you deal with that gray area? It's 9 o'clock now. It's 9:30 now. You know, how do you make sure that these kids who are out doing positive things, who aren't out doing things mischievous, and I've seen the most things happen between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. I want to say that too. You know, as far as my neighborhood, the break-ins and stuff, they know they do it when people are at work. They don't do it that time. And I've had to change to an 8-year-old who was outside at 8 o'clock. So there's a lot of gray area, and I understand that you have to set guidelines, and there has to be a cutoff somewhere, and you have to have policies in place where you can't really work specifically around those gray areas, but I feel like it's going to be to the disadvantage of a lot of the people, especially the youth who are in this room today.
If I can comment, ma'am, and I hear all your concerns. There again, if I could echo that the curfew, and curfew is really not a good word for it because people think that you can't be on the street at all, and you're addressing that way, but we talked about the times that you can, and it's coming and going from different things. This curfew for the city of Baltimore has been here for 20 years, 20 plus years. This is not something that's new. The enforcement of it isn't something that's new. It's been there since, I believe, 1994, and I could be wrong about that. I had hair back in 1994. That's how long that was. In 2013, we had 3,197 curfew violations. That's in 2013. 2014, right now, we're at 719. And so the police department's been doing it a long time. And when you have a child, and you're absolutely right, you know, you could have, I run into young people out there on the street on a regular basis who are 14 years old and who are like 6 feet. And I'm like, whoa, I wish I had that size when I played football back in the day. But how you find that out is you use some common sense. And what I'm trying to get into the officers is to ask the young people questions. And I gave a good example of the young people that I ran into at 3 a.m. in the morning. Another way is, you know, call your parents. You know, and that's not the first time I've run into young people. I ran into young people in our downtown area who were doing things that they shouldn't have been doing. And I could have easily arrested them, but I didn't. What I did is I called the parents. And I said, hey, do you know what your sons and daughters are doing down here? Do you know they're down here? Can you come pick them up? And what I really want to get across to my officers is that we're not trying to harm the young people within our community. What I would like to realize is to give them a call, give parents a call. First thing, if we're close to home, take the kids home. Because the issue is making a connection, and unless there's an issue that you see where that child's not safe, then we'll deal with it another way. But take that child home and reconnect them with the parents, and that's using some common sense, and I expect that out of the officers. And you know what you don't get to hear, and when we go to the community meetings, you hear a lot about what the officers don't do, and you hear the negative stories and the negative interactions. What I do have to say is there's a lot of police officers here who do a lot of mentoring that you don't get to hear about, you really do. There's a lot of police officers who are coaches in sports teams around our city as a whole who are working with young people on a regular basis. I share with you my drive and passion for what I do, and I've been doing it for 33 years, is for young people. That is my driving passion, to make it better for young people to have hope there. We've just started an Explorer Academy. So I always talk about how other people can help our young people, and mentoring is something I push in every meeting that I have. You know, people talk a good game, but they don't come out and they don't try to help our young people. So I talk to people about, you know, putting your money where your mouth is and coming out and mentoring young people, and not just pointing the finger at government. And what I said is that we need to do it as a police department also. So we just started what we call an Explorer Police Academy, where really what we're doing is we're giving meals to young people in the morning. We're giving meals, we're giving lunches for them. We're having activities out at our police academy, and we're having young people out there on a regular basis to do exactly what the fire chief is doing, is try to let kids know that they could have a positive interaction with police, to educate the young people and know what we're doing and answer their questions. But at the same time, one of the driving forces for me, and you talk about the officers who are coming in contact with the young kids on the bicycles. Some of my robbery issues that I have within the city are kids on bicycles too. And so depending on what part of the community is that I'm asking officers to stop young people, and legally stop them with reasonable suspicion, and have a decent conversation. What I don't expect from my officers is to have the conversations as the lady had, Ms. Bagley, addressed earlier, but we will do it professionally, we will do it respectfully, and we will do it constitutionally.
Did anyone else from the panel want to comment? So Madam Mayor, before we go to back to the floor, I did want to give an opportunity to some of our partners who are sitting with us on the front. Mr. Howard Henderson, who is president of the Baltimore Urban League, has been at several meetings. He's brought up questions, trying to get through. Yes, sir.
First of all, I'd like to applaud the mayor and Councilman Scott for taking this bold step. It's much needed in our city. Our young people are too precious to us, and we need to do something. I've heard both sides of this argument, from the ACL youth to everyone else, but the remedies is what we're talking about, stepping up and making a difference in the lives of our young people in our community. One of the things I was concerned about, and I think Councilman Scott can speak to this, is what is the oversight procedures that will be in place to make sure that this program is operating properly?
Thank you, sir. Quite frankly, the police department and city council, under the leadership of myself and the chairman of the Public Safety Committee, Warren Branch, have been upping our oversight of the department. So we have the commissioner come in quarterly to report to us on everything involved in the crime fight in the city, and we'll do the same thing with the curfew. So 4 times a year, we will have them and Ms. Jonice come before us, talk about all the curfew violations, what happened with the young people, what are the complaints like, what are the people complaining about, what are we working on, well, what we have to improve on. So we'll be doing that throughout the year, and there'll be a report annually from the commissioner to the city council about curfew and curfew enforcement in the city.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? You want to? Yes, we have, but I have a gentleman in the plaid who's in the glasses. Yes, sir. Your hand has been up for a minute. I do see the hands that are up, so I'll come back over to this side of the room. I know that the young lady in the stripe had her hand up, then I'll come to the young lady in the blue. Yes, sir. Your name and your question.
I don't know if I need that or not. My name is Kenji Scott. I am, I guess I'm nobody. I'm a citizen of Baltimore. I live in Park Heights. I have over 25 years of working with young people, troubled youth. I'm a Baltimore City foster parent. I work with some of the toughest kids we have in the city. Sometimes my phone rings at 5 o'clock in the morning. I have kids who have stabbed other kids in my house. I have kids who broke out all the windows in the back of my house. And so what I'm saying to the commissioner, and what I'm saying to the mayor and to Angela, she knows me, we worked together before, I know Brandon. I love children. I know that some of our kids can be hard to work with. And I know police. And I know we live in a tough city. And in the middle of the night, at 3 o'clock in the morning, you have a police officer who has just left a homicide. And you have a knucklehead who lives in my house. And they are engaging one another. That's a volatile situation. I shared with the mayor in Starbucks, I agree with the curfew. I totally, yes. You know, I'm with you, sister. I'm behind you on this. And y'all know I oppose a lot of stuff around here. But I believe in keeping our babies safe. That's important to me. So all the folks who are talking about criminalizing children, the hell with that. Because at the end of the day, we got to save our kids. And so we can come and bitch and complain and raise all the hell in the world. But you know what? I want to know how many folk are tired of riding babies out to King's Memorial Park. Now, we ought to talk about that. So when we come in here today, if we can't come with some real solutions, then we ain't helping the solution. We ain't helping at all. But what I do have, the question I have, and I go back to this, Brandon, because you told me that Toby was involved. I want to make sure the school police, and I wish we could do this over again, Commissioner Batts. I like you, know, we email you all the time. This is the first time you're seeing me. I want to make sure that the school police is involved, and the reason why I say that is because the school police has a history and the culture of working with our young people, and you know what? We take the stress off of police officers who are already saying we don't want to do it. And so as we go, it's an evolution, y'all. It ain't the end. It ain't the end yet. We still building it. We still working with it, so we can always add to it. So let's just not cut it off at the knees because it sounds, you know, we do that a lot around Baltimore. we like to say what won't work before we even try it. So what I want to say, and I talked to David Thompson, too, over the Department of Social Services, my buddy. We all agree. We want to make sure we get the best out of what we're doing when we engage in our children. Because, you know, Madam Mayor, like I shared with you, it is just not common to have babies out at 2 o'clock in the morning. Some gotta be going on. So you know what, that's what we have to get to the bottom of. We can say, well, you know, I rolled up on the police and I saw them taking the kids off the bike. Well, you know what? I had a kid break the windows out of my house and I drugged that kid. I know I was wrong.
All right, Mr. Scott.
But hold up. Let me finish. I took the kid in my house and I called the police. This kid was a foster kid. This kid went to another place, but until this day, this kid still calls me. Because it's about engaging our children productively. At the end of the day, we gotta come up with some of the best solutions instead of the best complaints.
Thank you, Kenji. And as he mentioned and talked about school police, I left school police off the list, but they are very much involved. And for those that talked about accountability, we will have regular, and we do have regular conversations, and we'll have an implementation team in place who are looking at the functioning of the connection centers and seeing how we can grow, how we can improve, and are we having the intended results. And so that work is going forth. School police are at the table. As you know, we just got a new school CEO. So we are looking to engage other staff within city schools, particularly student support services, because they have been at the table with us since 2007. So our list of partners is broad and wide, and we are continuing to look for other ways to partner because this is about saving our young people.
And if I could add to that, then Kenji, I have to applaud you standing up and the courage that you have in challenging us. And Mr. Scott challenges me all the time. He emails me at all times of the night, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and it's funny because I respond back to him too at the same time. So we have some very good conversations. But you know, the thing with Mr. Scott is that he challenges, and a lot in his challenges, there's a lot of truth to it. And I do a lot of listening to him and things. And one of the things that he brought up earlier is foster kids and how foster kids get lost in the shuffle and lost between the cracks. And in the meeting I was in this morning with my boss right there, what did I bring up? What Kenji Scott brought up with foster kids and what we need to do with them and to address those things. But here's another piece that he brings up that I really want to kind of cover. Now, Mr. Scott said we need to have the school police impact our kids. Why? Because we think they do a better job in relating to our young people. We also talked about social workers being out there. You're not going to have enough social workers out there at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. And also when I go around to meetings, we have people who say in the community, we like the NSUs, our neighborhood services officers. And so we have school police, neighborhood services officers, but those other guys over there, you know, I don't care for them because I don't think they handle it right. I would be remiss when my time comes to move on to another job if I don't start building an organization that all the police officers are seen that way. So I can't relate just on to the school police. I can't relate to just the NSUs. What I have to do is start reconstructing an organization that all the police officers are seen as a positive interaction. Now, what caught me, and I'll be truthful, and I just kind of say what my heart is, and I kind of tell the truth. You have to start by admitting that there's issues, and then you have to start correcting the issues. Well, we sat with some young people. Daryl DeSouza, right here in the front row, sat with some young people about a summer ago, and he had the young people list what are the 6 top things that you want from a police department. Then we had police officers interacting with the young people, and had the officers relate their top 6. This always stayed with me. The young people said their number one thing that they want from police officers, we want them to act like adults. That has never left me, and that's always impacted me. So I have to build. And what that comes to is Mr. Scott said, when you have an officer interacting with a young person that has high testosterone, and you have that ability, the adult doesn't let that young person just kind of loose. An adult kind of says, I understand. I know you have pain. I know you don't have trust. I know you have, and you work with that. And you talk to them and you bring them down. And what the young people always say is, don't disrespect me. So we start with respecting them. And that's how I do the interaction. That's the type of police department I want to build, where you don't have to do just school police. And I know you may say, well, it's not going to happen because we say things won't work before they start off the ground. Give it time. Give it time. It wasn't broken overnight. It won't be fixed overnight, but we're going in the right direction to build an organization you could be proud of.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am. Your name and your question.
Hi, my name is Asia, and I'm 16, and I feel as though like I'm in high school now, and it's my last year, and y'all said that the morning curfew is from 7 to 3. I don't go to school. I don't get to school till 9. School for me don't start till 9. So how y'all going to do that? Like, am I going to get pulled over or something for going to school? Because school don't open till 9 o'clock.
Thank you, Miss Asia.
Okay. Thank you, Asia. Ms. Janice pointed out earlier that traveling to and from school is exemption, so no, they won't be pulling you off the bus stop to take you in violation of curfew. And actually, each district is aware of what time the schools start in their area, so the commanders and those officers are aware of the school time start and what time they let out.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Sonia Merchant Jones, Better Waverly Community Organization, and I just want to share this. My nephew, 15 years old, he got in an argument with his sister. He walked out at 1 o'clock in the morning. He walked out, and we didn't know where he was. He walked all the way across Clifton Park. He was on his way to Kennedy Krieger because as a kid, that was his safe place. When he got there, security called the police officer, and the police officer took him to what is now a connection center. I thank God for that connection center because Malik is going through something. He lost his mother this year. She's 33 years old, lost his mother. And they took him into that connection center, and they treated us all so swell. They really did. They wanted to know what was the reason that he was out at 1 and 2 at 1 o'clock in the morning. He got in an argument with his sister. They evaluated the family. Now Malik is in respite care, and he's on his medication, and he's getting all of the help that he needs. We love it. We want it. And this is one of the scenarios. It's not always something that's negative or you want to hurt somebody. More than anything, I thank the mayor for putting this in place, for showing love. She's a mother. I've been one for 40 years, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir. Gentlemen, we will get to you on this side. Many of you know this young man with his hand up who's been patient as Shorty. So, Shorty, it's your turn. Thank you, sir.
My name's Shorty. I got a program I've been doing since 2006. I do free food and barbecue. I give away books. I do things in the community. I've been policing the police since 2006, and I got a program called Self-Help Organization for the Redevelopment and Reeducation of the Young. And Governor O'Malley approved it when he was mayor. Policing the police and this curfew got to go hand in hand. You can have good stories, but the bad stories going to outshine the good. All right? I got 9 kids by 6 different women in 4 different states. Not saying it in a disrespectful way, but I take care of my kids. I can't be a father to my child if I'm locked up. I can't be a father to my child in another state. So the community do have to step up, all right? My issue is with the economics involved in this. You had a curfew since '92. I don't see why y'all want to put this economic thing in this curfew as far as the fines and of that nature. Because if you had a curfew since '94 or '92, then twerk it and work that one and leave the money thing out. I say this about the money thing because I work in the communities just like Park Heights. I work all over. And if this mother lose her job because she had to go to the curfew center to take care of her son, she got to leave Baltimore. If this mother ain't got enough money to put food on the table and she just barely paying her bills and ain't no electric, ain't no air conditioning in that house, them kids is out that house because it's hot in there. These are matchboxes, all right? Now, I work with the police, but the police got to work with the people. You can't sit here and threaten and intimidate when you're here to serve and protect. And y'all know how I hold you accountable. I got plenty of videos where the police is out of line and out of order. I got a complaint with Officer Hill that they can't even find my paperwork. So as far as y'all being accountable, y'all got holes in the carpet. You want to trust you? Dude, you got to earn that.
Thank you, Shorty.
Sure.
So before we get, yes, sir, just 1 second. I just wanted to the folks who have your hands up, I see your hands, yes, ma'am, on this side and in the blue. But Councilman Scott, yes, sir.
Thank you, Shorty. As you know, I appreciate everything you do, but I'm going to talk particularly about the financial component of the curfew. So the truth of the matter is that while I don't twerk, I just work. So we actually did work this out. But actually, the financial fines have always been in place for the curfew. What happened is, because I removed the criminal penalties altogether, what we did is we took the maximum fine up to 500 to 300. But I will let you know that the overwhelming majority, 99% of the people that get this, is the minimum $50 fine. That's what, let me finish. You had your chance. Let me finish. $50 fine. And what I will also tell you is that last summer we only gave out 3 maximum fines. That's it. 3 people out of hundreds of kids that came through the center, their parents got a maximum fine of $300. But also I will tell you that, again, in the bill, there are ways that you cannot pay that fine to begin with. You don't have to pay those fines, and the majority of the people that got those fines didn't pay them. They just did community service to go away. This is not about being financially punitive. Again, there are ways around that, and this has been in existence for over 20 years with folks getting the minimum fine. The maximum fine is reserved for very, 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 very particular cases where we know that there needs to be a strong statement made for that family.
And if I could also add to, as Shorty, we give these presentations on a regular basis, and he's made this statement probably about 20 different times as we go through these presentations. And I only say this because I think it's very important to clarify points, and sometimes we got to make sure that things are not disingenuous. What's critical for me is that anybody makes a complaint, we jump on it and we follow up, because that's a critical piece. People need to know that my voice is heard and that we follow up on that. And Shorty has met with this gentleman multiple times here. He goes to meetings every time and says, we never met with him. And my IA chief, just like he met with Ms. Is it Tuggle over here, I believe, he meets with him on a regular basis. So when we do that, we follow up, but that's part of what we're here to do. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear, that we actually have done that.
One second. No, I'm sorry. Like, Shorty, no, you're not. No, you're going to be respectful, Shorty. You ask a question at every public safety forum we have. No, I'm checking it out right now. And you cut off the commissioner while he was talking. There are other people here that want to ask a question, and we're going to get to them. You cut him off before he was finished. Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am, who had the orange on? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Erica Harris, and I'm from Baltimore County. I am a single mother of 3 children, but I was led to be here tonight. And the reason that I'm here is for this purpose. Many of our children are hurting because of irresponsible adults. Many of our children are going through the pain and going through the system because the parents are not being responsible for the children that you gave birth to. If you train up a child in the way in which they should go, then when they become of age to go out of the house on their own, then they won't depart from the ways that have been instilled in them. Now, I'm going to say this. It takes a village to raise one child. And if we all would come together and put ourselves on the back burner and start loving one another and caring for each other, then the system that's broken in Baltimore City and Baltimore County could be fixed. I want to leave you with this. An idle mind is the devil's workshop. I am clear that God sent me here tonight. I am a minister of the gospel, and I stand for Jesus Christ. The difference that will take place in our city is when we start turning back to Jesus Christ. When we start falling on our knees and start praying and believing God for the necessary change that can transpire in this city. We need to unify. We need to come together. We need to put the foolishness on the side, and we need to recognize what matters first and begin to get to business as it needs to be in order.
Thank you, Ms. Harris.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Good evening. My name is Roxanne. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Good evening. My name is Roxanne Allen. I'm an education organizer. I'm also a new elected co-chair of the Baltimore Education Coalition. My question is, so I heard you guys mention several times that children will not have a record of this. What is the protocol for parents who are non-compliant to the referrals offered by the curfew centers? Also, what happens to a child if the parent does not respond in a timely manner?
May I have your last name again, Ms. Roxy? Was first?
Allen, A-L-L-E-N.
As Councilman Scott outlined, there is a provision in the law that a civil citation or a fine can be issued to parents, but I want to reiterate that the staff that will be in the connection centers will work with parents to identify no to low-cost services for the young person and the family. And so we will continue to work with families to identify where they can get services. And there's also a provision that if they complete a counseling session, that fee and that citation are waived. I'm getting to that. So if a parent is not compliant, then that civil citation stays in place. And also, if a parent is in the position that they're not able to pick up their child during the hours of the connection center's operations, then historically, when the center is closing down for the evening, the child, if contact has been made with the parent, and we can get the parent on the phone who says, I'm home, I can't get to the center, then transportation will be arranged. School police have transported children home when we're able to make the connection with the parent. If we're not able to contact a parent or an adult who can pick the child up from the connection center, then at the end of the evening or the wee hours of the morning, that child is referred to the Department of Social Services. And so a staff person from Child Protective Services picks the child up from the center and makes additional efforts to contact a parent or guardian.
And anyone else from the panel? So, yes, your name, your question? Yes.
My name is Janet Arnett. I am a criminal justice student. And most people that's here, a majority of us that's here, we already police our own children. And it's the parents that are not here that needs to be here. And as far as police and interaction with young people, honestly, police should be scared of some of these young people. And what worked for me as a single parent of 3, PAL program. All after the PAL program, race to read. After that, me. I'm the biggest police in my house. And that's where it needs to stay. So it's not us, it's them that's not here. What are you going to do with us if we're the one that's trying to help you with those? Those children don't have parents at home. I used to be Park Heights too, and I've seen several kids. I don't care how many times police take them home. You better off staying out in the street before you go in your house. So now what? And I will not drop none of my criminal justice professors' name, bad as I want to.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I will start by saying that once you're Park Heights, you're always Park Heights. You can never take it out of you. But to your point, we all know that the overwhelming majority of parents in our city care for their kids and they do what they should by their kids. What we need to do is this is what this is about. like we said before, this is a way for us to identify, because lo and behold, the reality of what we're saying is a reality of what happens on the streets of Baltimore. Children are not going to walk up to me. They're not going to walk up to the colonel. They're not going to walk up to the mayor. And in a lot of cases, they're not going to walk into their teacher and say, hey, my mom isn't doing right. It's not going to happen, because we all know those children who have those parents who, for whatever reason, have done whatever to them kids. Whenever someone takes them away, what's the first place they run? Right back to those parents. This is a tool for us to identify those children and those families, and for us, as Angela has been saying all night, to figure out ways how to make those families whole. It's not just about the children. We have to figure out ways to make those families whole. But again, as the lady said, this is not just about us. It's going to take all of us to do that. I know when I grew up, anyone that lived on the 25 to 2800 block of West Cold Spring had the right to put their hands on my behind. We know it's the truth of the matter. It's the truth. Oh, yes, ma'am. Most definitely without a child abuse charge. And in my case, it's even worse because my local police officer was one of my dad's best friends, so I bet not tell him anything about that. But we have to come together as a community to do this as well, because you have to know your neighbors, especially. I know every young person that lives in my neighborhood. I have to. I thrive off that. I love the young people. But there are people who are, you can't be afraid of the young people. There are so many people in our city that say, oh, you need to do this with young people. Oh, you need to do this with young people. Oh, you need to do this with young people. If you ask them to go read to them, oh, I don't want to do that. And lo and behold, if you ask them to mentor, I don't want to do that. If we're so scared of them and so afraid of them, what do you think they're going to do? If you know they're not whole at home, the community has to step in, not just government, to try to make those young people whole again.
Thank you, Councilman Scott. So for those of you who have your hands up, what you can't see behind you are the number of people from Morgan who are telling me, and the folks from Charm TV are telling me, Tom, President Wilson was kind enough, and I know, Madam Mayor, you thanked him in your opening remarks. He was kind enough to allow us to be here tonight. We certainly want to respect the time that Morgan has allowed for this forum and respect the schedule and the shift that those employees who work here are working on. With that said, I just wanted, I had two people that I wanted to ask questions. So, thank you, Madam Mayor. The mayor actually added to my talking points a good point, and that is, those of you who walked in, you should have received a survey that allows for us to capture your information. I'm going to ask that you fill that out and you leave that on the table outside. I'm going to also ask you to send an email to curfew@baltimorecity.gov if you have a question or comment that was not heard this evening. Again, that's curfew@baltimorecity.gov, and we will have a quick question. Yes, ma'am, and we will end.
She had her hand up too, so we're going to be very brief.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, there's one thing about when you raised the question of either or, one thing has not been addressed, and that's recreation centers. And just a couple years ago, some very popular rec centers were closed, including one in Northeast Baltimore. And I think that, when they're popular and the kids go to them and do sports, I think it's a real problem to shut them down. I just want to say I'm old enough. I've lived in Baltimore all my life. I'm a grandma now. But my children, we grew up in Howard Park in the 60s, and there were two wonderful programs at Howard Park Elementary School for the summer, ballet, which my daughter went to, and a woodworking shop. And it made the whole summer really wonderful and tolerable. And I would encourage more rec centers.
Can you, if you don't mind? If you don't mind.
My name is Leah Lori Hahn.
Right, I was confused. Which rec center in Northeast did we close?
There were a couple. There was
in
one right off of York Road that was closed, I think, 2 years ago.
No. So I will say that when I became, prior to becoming mayor, the previous administration had closed all of the PAL centers, except for one. Yes, good now. With no plans for, how to make sure that we are expanding opportunities for young people, without a plan for what the future of recreation would be in the city. When I became mayor, it was clear that we were doing a disservice to families by keeping centers open that we wouldn't send our own children to, but to say that we didn't close anything, we were keeping them open. Bathrooms that didn't work, people weren't using them, and we were paying the same amount to keep those open as the ones where you had hundreds of kids using them a day. And before I did anything, before I closed any center, I went to the community and asked, you take a look at the centers, you take a look at best practices, you tell me what you want. And they were very, very clear. It was a cross-section of the community, including elected officials, and they said that they wanted the future of recreation. They wanted quality centers. They wanted expanded hours, expanded staffing, expanded services. They wanted more than what we were offering. And we couldn't keep the ones that were run down, underused, and in many cases unsafe, open, and at the same time plan for better. So when I said it's not either or, that we're doing both, I mean it. We've expanded programming, expanded hours. We have 2 centers that are coming online now with more in the future. And it is the centers that people said that they wanted. More staff, better programming, and higher quality. And for me, if we can have this conversation until I'm, old and gray, and we can say you closed recreation centers, but I'm willing to have that conversation because I wasn't satisfied I'm not that politician. I'm not going to keep something open just so I can say I did when it's not something that I would want to send my child to. I want quality centers with quality programming, and my commitment is to put that in place while I'm mayor in Baltimore. We've already started doing it, and I will continue to do that while I'm mayor.
And just to add to that comment, actually, ma'am, there was a brand new rec center built in Northeast in Clifton Park, the Rita Church Center, that is now open. So we have that across the city. But being a young person, I know what recreation and parks used to be, but also now being an elected official and going to different cities to see. I was ashamed when I went to Kansas City and saw their centers versus ours. And the guy told me they used to be just like us. They used to have hundreds of small centers, and they got smart and said, hey, we need larger cities, larger centers for our children to see, and that is the model across the country, and that's what we should go to. It's not just about what the city. I'm blessed to have no closed rec centers in my district, but I only have 2 that the city runs. There are also 2 that are run by community organizations that have been there forever that are great because the community knows better than someone from government what those children in those communities want. So we have to look at outside the box and not just keep doing things for the sake of doing it.
And in addition, on top of that, even with the programs and the recreational opportunities that we're expanding, that still wouldn't address the issue of kids being out at 2 o'clock in the morning. So this is, and again, just like I had my revelation moment with Mr. Scott in the Starbucks a couple weeks ago, it's not about how we can stack the complaints. It's about how we can stack the solutions and work together as a community on a problem we know exists. If we want to be truthful with ourselves, we will acknowledge that there are kids that are slipping through the cracks, that slip through the cracks when no school is open, no rec center is open, and when others who should have their best interests at heart are turning a blind eye. We cannot. This is about finding those solutions and trying to do the best we can for those children and their families. And that is my commitment, and that's what I will continue to do. Again, I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank Morgan and for giving us the opportunity to be here, and say to all of you who have your hands raised, curfew at baltimorecity.gov. We will get back to you immediately. Thank you.
Thank you very much.